The rain hammered against the cracked windshield of Victoria Sterling's disabled Mercedes as she sat in the driver's seat, watching water cascade down the glass like tears. The engine had died 20 minutes ago on 8 Mile Road, leaving her stranded in one of Detroit's most forgotten neighborhoods at nearly 2 a.m. Her phone had died hours earlier during a particularly heated board meeting that had run well past midnight, and now she found herself in a situation no amount of money could immediately fix. Victoria Sterling, at 34, was worth more than the GDP of small countries. Her tech empire, Stellar Sync, had revolutionized cloud computing and data analytics, making her one of the youngest female billionaires in America. She was used to problems being solved with a single phone call, to doors opening before she even reached them, to a world that bent to her will. But sitting in her luxury car in the middle of a thunderstorm in Detroit's East Side, she felt more powerless than she had since her childhood. The storm had caught everyone off guard. What had started as light drizzle during her drive back from a late-night investor meeting in downtown Detroit had quickly escalated into a full-scale tempest. The Weather Service was calling it the worst storm to hit southeastern Michigan in a decade. Trees were down across the metro area, power lines were sparking in the streets, and emergency services were overwhelmed. Victoria pulled her Hermes blazer tighter around her shoulders and stepped out into the torrential rain. Within seconds, her perfectly styled auburn hair was plastered to her head, and her designer clothes were soaked through. She looked around desperately for any sign of life, any place that might offer shelter or a phone she could use. The neighborhood around her told a story of economic decline that was all too familiar in Detroit. Abandoned lots dotted the landscape between modest homes, many of which showed signs of foreclosure or neglect. Streetlights flickered intermittently, and the few that remained steady cast eerie shadows through the rain. This was not Victoria's world. Her usual route between meetings took her along well-maintained highways and through carefully manicured business districts. She had never ventured into neighborhoods like this one, where her monthly car payment could cover a year's rent. As she stumbled through the rain, her high heels making treacherous contact with the wet pavement, Victoria spotted a faint glow in the distance. A bus stop shelter, illuminated by a single functioning streetlight, beckoned like a lighthouse in a storm. She hurried toward it, nearly slipping twice on the slick concrete. The shelter was basic, just a metal frame with plexiglass walls and a simple bench, but it offered some protection from the driving rain. Victoria collapsed onto the bench, breathing heavily and trying to process her situation. She had left her security detail behind for this meeting, preferring to drive herself when she needed time to think. Now that decision seemed catastrophically stupid. She sat there for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes, watching the storm rage around her. The wind was picking up, and even the meager shelter couldn't keep her completely dry. Her clothes were drenched, and she was beginning to shiver. For the first time in years, Victoria Sterling felt genuinely vulnerable. That's when she saw the headlights cutting through the rain. Michael Rodriguez was on his way home from his second job, a night shift cleaning office buildings downtown. At 41, he had spent the last 8 years raising his daughter Sophia alone, after his wife Maria died in a car accident. He worked 2 jobs, days at a packaging warehouse and nights cleaning offices, just to keep their small rental house and put food on the table. The overtime was killing him, but Sophia needed school supplies, clothes that fit, and a future that looked different from his own. His 2008 Honda Civic wasn't much to look at, with rust spots along the wheel wells and a persistent rattle in the engine, but it was reliable and paid for. He'd been driving extra carefully in the storm, knowing that getting stranded would mean missing his day shift and losing a day's pay they couldn't afford. As he rounded the corner onto 8 Mile Road, his headlights swept across the bus stop and illuminated a figure huddled on the bench. Michael slowed down, squinting through the rain-streaked windshield. It was a woman, and she looked like she was in trouble. Michael had been raised by his grandmother in this very neighborhood after his parents were deported when he was 12. Abuela Rodriguez had taught him that you help people when they need it, no questions asked. It was a lesson that had stuck with him through years of his own struggles, through Maria's death, through nights when he'd had to choose between paying the electric bill and buying Sophia new shoes. He pulled over and rolled down his window. "Hey, you okay?" he called out in accented English, having to shout over the sound of the rain. Victoria looked up, startled. Through the rain and poor lighting, she could make out a man in an older car. Her first instinct was caution. She'd been taught to be wary of strangers, especially in neighborhoods like this. But something in his voice, a genuine concern rather than threat, made her respond. "My car broke down," she called back, gesturing vaguely in the direction of her Mercedes. "My phone's dead. I just need to get somewhere I can call for help." Michael could see she was soaked to the bone and shivering. He made a quick decision. Get in, he said, unlocking the passenger door. I'll take you somewhere warm. Victoria hesitated for a moment. In her world, getting into a stranger's car was unthinkable. She had bodyguards specifically to prevent situations like this. But the alternative was sitting in the storm all night, and something about this man's demeanor suggested he meant no harm. She ran to the car and slid into the passenger seat, grateful to be out of the rain. The interior was clean but worn, with a rosary hanging from the rearview mirror and a child's drawing taped to the dashboard. It smelled like pine air freshener and faintly of the industrial soap Michael used at his cleaning job. Thank you, Victoria said, trying to wring water out of her hair. I'm Victoria. Michael, he replied, pulling back onto the road. Where were you trying to get to? Victoria realized she didn't have a good answer. Her penthouse was in downtown Detroit's Renaissance Center, but she couldn't very well ask this good Samaritan to drive her to one of the most expensive addresses in the city. She needed to maintain the fiction that she was just a regular person who'd had car trouble. I was staying with a friend, she said, thinking quickly, but I don't want to wake them up in the middle of the night like this. Michael glanced at her in the dim light of the dashboard. She was clearly upset and probably in shock from being stranded in the storm. He made another quick decision. Look, I know this might sound weird, but I live just a few blocks from here. My daughter's asleep, but I've got a couch and some dry clothes you could borrow. In the morning, when the storm's passed, I can help you figure out how to get your car fixed or call your friend. Victoria stared at him. This complete stranger was offering her shelter with no expectation of anything in return. In her world, every kindness came with a price tag. Every gesture had an ulterior motive. She found herself nodding before she could think of all the reasons why this was a terrible idea. That's very kind of you, she said softly. Are you sure it's not too much trouble? No trouble at all, Michael replied. My abuela always said the storms pass easier when you're not facing them alone. As they drove through the empty streets, Victoria found herself studying Michael's profile in the dashboard light. He looked tired, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that came from working too hard for too long. His clothes were clean but inexpensive, and his hands on the steering wheel were calloused from manual labor. Everything about him spoke of a life lived paycheck to paycheck, yet he was going out of his way to help a complete stranger. They pulled into the driveway of a small house on a quiet residential street. It was modest but well-maintained, with a tiny front yard and a porch light that cast a warm glow through the rain. This was Michael's sanctuary, the place he'd worked 2 jobs to keep so Sophia would have stability and safety. Come on, Michael said, grabbing an umbrella from the back seat. Let's get you inside before you catch pneumonia. As they hurried up the front walk, Victoria caught glimpses of the neighborhood around them. The houses were small and close together, many showing signs of economic stress, but also signs of life. Gardens in front yards, children's toys on porches, windows glowing with warm light. It was a community that had clearly been hit hard by Detroit's economic struggles, but it was also a place where people looked out for each other. Michael's house was small but immaculate. The living room was dominated by a couch that had seen better days, but was covered with a colorful throw blanket. Family photos lined the mantel above a small fireplace, and children's books were stacked neatly on a coffee table. Everything spoke of a home where love mattered more than luxury. Let me get you a towel and some dry clothes, Michael said, keeping his voice low so as not to wake Sophia. The bathroom's just down the hall if you want to change. He disappeared for a moment and returned with a towel, a University of Michigan sweatshirt, and a pair of sweatpants. These might be a little big on you, but they're warm and dry. Victoria accepted the clothes gratefully. The sweatshirt was soft from many washings and smelled like fabric softener and home. It was probably the most expensive thing Michael owned, a relic from dreams of college that had been set aside when life intervened. When she emerged from the bathroom, she looked completely different. Gone was the polished executive in designer clothes. In the oversized sweatshirt and pants, with her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, she looked younger, more vulnerable, more human. Michael had made coffee and was sitting on one end of the couch, leaving plenty of space for her. The TV was on low volume, showing storm coverage from the local news. Trees were down across the metro area, and several roads were closed due to flooding. Looks like you picked a hell of a night to have car trouble, Michael said, handing her a steaming mug. They're saying this storm won't clear until tomorrow afternoon. Victoria wrapped her hands around the mug, savoring the warmth. The coffee was simple and strong, nothing like the artisanal blends she was used to, but it tasted perfect in this moment. I can't thank you enough for this, she said. Most people would have just driven past. Michael shrugged. Most people around here know what it's like to need help. We look out for each other. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the storm coverage and listening to the rain against the windows. Victoria found herself studying the family photos on the mantel. There was a wedding picture of Michael and a beautiful woman with kind eyes, photos of a little girl at various ages, and several pictures of what looked like 3 generations of family gathered around dinner tables and birthday cakes. "Your family?" she asked, nodding toward the photos. Michael's expression softened. "That's my daughter Sophia, she's 8, and that was my wife Maria." His voice caught slightly on her name. "She died 3 years ago." "I'm sorry," Victoria said, and meant it. Despite all her wealth and success, she had never experienced the kind of loss that was written in the lines around Michael's eyes. "Sophia's everything to me now," Michael continued. "She's smart as hell and wants to be a doctor when she grows up. I'm working 2 jobs to make sure she gets the chance." Victoria felt something twist in her chest. Here was a man who had lost everything that mattered and was rebuilding his life one day at a time, focused entirely on giving his daughter opportunities he'd never had. In her world, people talked constantly about their achievements, their acquisitions, their next big deal. Michael talked about his daughter's dreams. "What do you do?" she asked. "Days I work at a packaging warehouse. Nights I clean office buildings downtown. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills." He paused, then asked, "What about you? What do you do?" Victoria felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came whenever she had to maintain a deception. She had become so accustomed to people treating her differently once they knew who she was. The deference, the calculation, the way conversations became about what she could do for them rather than who she was as a person. "I work in business," she said vaguely. "Technology stuff. Pretty boring, really." Michael nodded politely and didn't press for details. In his experience, when people were vague about their work, it usually meant they were embarrassed about it or didn't want to talk about it. He respected that. "Well, whatever you do, I hope it's not too stressful," he said. "Life's too short to spend it being miserable at work." Victoria almost laughed at the irony. Her work consumed every waking moment, generated stress that kept her up at night, and had cost her every meaningful relationship in her life, but it had also made her richer than she could have imagined and given her power that most people couldn't dream of. "Sometimes it's worth it," she said carefully. "Sometimes you have to make sacrifices for the bigger picture." "Maybe," Michael said, taking a sip of his coffee. "But I learned after Maria died that the bigger picture doesn't mean much if you don't have people to share it with." His words hit Victoria like a physical blow. She thought about her penthouse, empty except for her and whatever assistant happened to be working late. She thought about dinners eaten alone while reading business reports, about holidays spent working because she had nowhere else to be. She had everything money could buy and no one to share it with. "The couch pulls out into a bed," Michael said, sensing that the conversation had gotten too heavy. "It's not the Ritz, but it's comfortable enough. There are extra blankets in the closet if you get cold." "This is perfect," Victoria said, and meant it. "You've been incredibly kind." As Michael showed her how to work the pull-out bed and got her settled with blankets and pillows, Victoria found herself looking around the small living room with new eyes. The furniture was old but well cared for. The walls were painted a warm yellow that made the space feel sunny even on a stormy night. Children's artwork was displayed with the same pride that museums showed masterpieces. This was a home in a way that her penthouse had never been. It was a place where people loved each other, where they gathered to share meals and stories and dreams. It was everything her money had never been able to buy. "If you need anything during the night, just holler," Michael said. "I'm a light sleeper anyway." After he disappeared down the hall to his bedroom, Victoria lay in the dark listening to the storm outside. Lightning illuminated the windows periodically, and thunder rolled across the sky like a bowling ball. But inside this small house, she felt safer than she had in years. She thought about the day that had led her here. The contentious board meeting where she'd had to defend her latest acquisition strategy. The investors who questioned every decision she made. The constant pressure to prove herself in a world dominated by men who had inherited their wealth rather than built it from nothing. She thought about the isolation that came with success, the way money created barriers even as it opened doors. But mostly she thought about Michael's kindness. He had seen a stranger in need and acted without hesitation, without calculation, without any expectation of return. In her world, that kind of generosity simply didn't exist. Every interaction was a transaction. Every relationship was strategic. As the storm raged outside, Victoria Sterling fell asleep on a second-hand couch in a house that could have fit into her penthouse's living room 3 times over. And for the first time in years, she slept peacefully, surrounded by the warmth of genuine human kindness. In the morning, Everything would change. But for now, she was just Victoria. Not a billionaire, not a CEO, not a name on a magazine cover. Just a woman who had been shown kindness by a stranger, and who was beginning to remember what it felt like to be human. The storm outside was beginning to weaken, but the storm inside Victoria Sterling's carefully constructed world was just beginning. Victoria woke to the sound of cartoons playing softly on the television and the smell of bacon frying. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was. The ceiling above her was different, lower than her penthouse bedroom, and the light streaming through the windows was filtered through simple cotton curtains rather than the custom blackout panels she was used to. Then it all came rushing back. The broken-down car, the storm, Michael's unexpected kindness. She sat up slowly, realizing she had slept better than she had in months. No stress dreams about quarterly projections, no middle-of-the-night wake-ups to check international markets, no anxiety about the next day's challenges, just deep, peaceful sleep. "Good morning," came a small voice from the armchair across the room. Victoria turned to see a little girl with dark curls and bright eyes watching her with open curiosity. She was wearing purple pajamas with unicorns on them and was eating a bowl of cereal while cartoons played on the TV with the volume turned low. "You must be Sophia," Victoria said, suddenly self-conscious about her appearance. She probably looked like she'd been through a hurricane, which wasn't far from the truth. "Daddy said you got stuck in the storm," Sophia said matter-of-factly. "That was really scary, right? I hate storms. They're too loud and they make me worry about the roof leaking." Victoria smiled despite herself. There was something refreshing about Sophia's directness, her complete lack of pretense. "It was pretty scary," she admitted. "But your dad helped me out. He's very nice." "Daddy's the best," Sophia said with the absolute certainty that only children possess. "He works really hard so I can have things, and he makes the best pancakes in the whole world." As if summoned by their conversation, Michael appeared from the kitchen carrying a plate of pancakes and a cup of coffee. He looked tired but cheerful, and Victoria realized he had probably been up for a while, getting ready for his day job at the warehouse. "Good morning," he said, setting the plate and coffee on the table near the couch. "I figured you might be hungry. And don't worry about the time. It's only 7:30. I called in sick to the warehouse today anyway. With all the storm damage, I figured they wouldn't be running full operations." Victoria stared at the plate of pancakes. They were perfectly golden, stacked high, with butter melting on top and syrup drizzled artfully around the edges. It had been years since anyone had made her breakfast. She usually grabbed coffee and maybe a protein bar on her way to the office. "You called in sick?" she asked, concerned. "You didn't have to do that. I can figure out how to get my car fixed." Michael shrugged. "Day off won't kill me. Besides, look outside." Victoria looked through the window and gasped. The storm had left its mark on the neighborhood. Tree branches littered the streets, power lines hung dangerously low, and several cars were trapped under fallen debris. Her Mercedes was probably the least of anyone's problems today. "The news is saying it'll take at least until this afternoon to get the main roads cleared," Michael continued. "And a lot of places don't have power. You're welcome to stay until things get sorted out." Sophia bounced in her chair. "You should stay. We could play games and watch movies, and Daddy could teach you how to make his special grilled cheese sandwiches." Victoria felt that strange twist in her chest again. When was the last time anyone had wanted her company just for the sake of it? In her world, people wanted to spend time with her because of what she could do for them, the deals she could make, the connections she could provide. Sophia wanted her to stay so they could play games. "I don't want to impose," Victoria said carefully. "You're not imposing," Michael said firmly. "Sophia's right. It'll be nice to have some company for a change." As Victoria ate the pancakes, she found herself drawn into the family's morning routine. Sophia chattered about her school, which was closed today due to storm damage, and her favorite teacher, Mrs. Peterson, who was teaching them about the solar system. Michael made more coffee and cleaned up the kitchen, moving with the efficient grace of someone who had learned to manage a household on his own. "Daddy, can we show Victoria the garden?" Sophia asked as she finished her cereal. "If she wants to see it," Michael replied, "but let her finish eating first." "You have a garden?" Victoria asked. Sophia's eyes lit up. "We grow tomatoes and beans and carrots. Daddy taught me how to plant seeds and everything. Do you want to see?" Victoria found herself nodding. In her world, food came from expensive restaurants or was prepared by a private chef. She had never grown anything in her life. After breakfast, despite the muddy conditions left by the storm, Sophia insisted on giving Victoria a tour of their small backyard. The garden was modest but clearly well-tended. Neat rows of vegetables in various stages of growth, surrounded by a border of cheerful marigolds that Sophia had chosen because they were happy colors. See, you have to water them every day, but not too much, or they get sick, Sophia explained seriously, leading Victoria around the garden like a tiny professor. And you have to talk to them nice, because plants have feelings too. Michael followed behind them, watching his daughter share her knowledge with this stranger who had appeared in their lives. There was something about Victoria that intrigued him. She was clearly educated and well-spoken, but there was also a quality of surprise in her reactions to everything, as if she was seeing the world with new eyes. "Do you have a garden where you live?" Sophia asked. Victoria thought about her penthouse terrace, professionally landscaped and maintained by a service she paid handsomely, but had never met. "Not really," she said. "I live in an apartment." "That's sad," Sophia said with the blunt honesty of childhood. "Everyone should have plants to take care of. It makes you feel good inside." As the morning progressed, Victoria found herself settling into the rhythm of their household. She helped Sophia with a puzzle while Michael fixed a loose cabinet door in the kitchen. She listened to Sophia read aloud from a book about dolphins. She watched Michael patiently help his daughter with a math worksheet, praising her efforts and gently correcting her mistakes. It was all so normal, so domestic, so far removed from Victoria's usual world of conference calls and power lunches and strategic planning sessions, and yet she found herself more engaged, more present than she had been in years. Around noon, Michael's phone rang. It was his supervisor from the cleaning company, asking if he could come in early for his evening shift since several other employees couldn't make it due to storm damage. "I need to take this," Michael told Victoria apologetically. "More overtime means more money, and Sophia needs new school clothes soon." Victoria watched him negotiate his schedule, agreeing to come in 3 hours early even though he had already missed a day's pay by not going to the warehouse. Everything in this family's life was calculated around Sophia's needs, around providing for her future. It was a kind of love that Victoria had never experienced. Unconditional, sacrificial, focused entirely on someone else's well-being. After Michael finished his call, Sophia announced that she wanted to make cookies. "For Victoria," she explained seriously, "because she's our guest and Abuela always said you make cookies for guests." "You don't have to do that," Victoria protested, but Sophia was already dragging a chair over to the kitchen counter to reach the cabinets. "She's got her mind made up," Michael said with a grin. "Trust me, it's easier to just go along with it." So Victoria found herself in the small kitchen, helping an 8-year-old measure flour and crack eggs, while Michael supervised and offered guidance. The kitchen was tiny compared to her penthouse's gourmet space, but it was warm and filled with laughter as Sophia insisted on doing everything herself and inevitably made a mess. "Cooking is like science," Sophia explained as she stirred the cookie dough with intense concentration. "You have to measure everything just right or it doesn't work. Mrs. Peterson taught us that." Victoria had never baked anything in her life. She watched Sophia's careful measurements and patient mixing with something approaching awe. This child understood concepts that Victoria's MBA classmates had struggled with, that success required attention to detail, that shortcuts usually led to failure, that the process was often as important as the outcome. As the cookies baked, filling the house with the warm smell of vanilla and chocolate chips, Victoria's phone buzzed. She had forgotten that she'd plugged it in to charge earlier. The screen showed dozens of missed calls and messages, her assistant, her security team, board members, business partners. The outside world was frantically trying to reach her. "Important call?" Michael asked, noticing her expression. "Work stuff," Victoria said, quickly silencing the phone. "Nothing that can't wait." But as she scrolled through the messages, she realized that her disappearance had triggered a full-scale panic. Her security team had found her abandoned car and was treating her absence as a potential kidnapping. The board was in emergency session, trying to decide whether to delay announcing their quarterly results. Her assistant had called the police, the hospitals, and apparently every contact in Victoria's phone. She needed to let them know she was safe, but she also wasn't ready to return to that world. Not yet. "Excuse me for just a minute," she said, stepping onto the back porch to make a call. Her head of security, Marcus, answered on the first ring. "Ms. Sterling. Thank God. Are you injured? Where are you? We have teams searching." "Marcus, I'm fine," Victoria interrupted. "I'm safe. My car broke down in the storm and a good Samaritan gave me shelter for the night." "Ma'am, we need to come get you immediately. The board can wait," Victoria said firmly. "I'll be back tomorrow. Cancel my appointments for today and tell everyone I'm handling a personal matter." "Ms. Sterling, with respect, that's not—" "Marcus," Victoria said, using the tone that had cowed CEOs and intimidated investors. "I am safe, I am unharmed, and I will contact you tomorrow with pickup arrangements. Is that clear? After she hung up, Victoria stood on the porch for a moment, looking out at the storm-damaged neighborhood. In the distance, she could see people emerging from their homes to check on neighbors, sharing generators, helping each other move fallen branches. It was a kind of community that her money had never been able to buy. When she went back inside, Sophia was carefully removing cookies from the oven with Michael's help. They were slightly lopsided and unevenly browned, but they smelled like heaven. "These look perfect," Victoria said, and meant it. Sophia beamed with pride. "Try one, but be careful, they're hot." Victoria bit into the warm cookie, and something inside her chest loosened. It wasn't the best cookie she'd ever tasted. That honor probably belonged to some five-star restaurant in Paris, but it was made with love, offered freely, and shared without expectation. It tasted like childhood, like home, like everything her money had never been able to purchase. "It's delicious," she told Sophia seriously. "Thank you for making them for me." As the afternoon wore on, Victoria found herself dreading Michael's departure for his evening job. The house would feel empty without his steady presence, and she would have to figure out how to get back to her own life. But more than that, she wasn't ready to leave this bubble of normalcy, this place where she was just Victoria, not Sterling Industries' CEO. Around 3 o'clock, Michael started getting ready for work. He showered and changed into his cleaning company uniform, then spent several minutes giving Sophia detailed instructions about her afternoon routine, reminding her to do her homework and not to answer the door for anyone. "Will you be okay here with Sophia for a few hours?" he asked Victoria. "I know it's a lot to ask, but my neighbor usually watches her and she's dealing with storm damage to her roof." Victoria realized she was being asked to babysit, something she had never done in her life. "Of course," she heard herself saying. "We'll be fine." After Michael left, the house felt different, quieter, more intimate. Sophia seemed to sense the change too, curling up next to Victoria on the couch with her homework spread across the coffee table. "I like you," Sophia announced as she worked on a worksheet about fractions. "You're different from most of Daddy's friends." "How so?" Victoria asked, genuinely curious. "You listen when I talk," Sophia said matter-of-factly. "And you're not trying to impress Daddy all the time." Victoria felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean?" Sophia shrugged, focused on her math problems. "Sometimes ladies try to be nice to Daddy because they want him to like them. But they don't really want to hear about my school or my garden or anything. You ask questions like, you really want to know the answers." Out of the mouths of babes, Victoria thought. This 8-year-old had just articulated something that Victoria had been struggling with her entire adult life: the difference between genuine interest and calculated charm. In her world, everything was performance, everything was strategy. But here, in this small house, with this perceptive child, she had found herself being authentic for the first time in years. "Your dad is lucky to have you," Victoria said softly. "I'm lucky to have him too," Sophia replied. "Even when he's tired and sad, he still makes time for me. That's what love is, right? Making time for people even when you don't want to?" Victoria sat back, stunned by the wisdom in Sophia's innocent words. When was the last time she had made time for someone just because she loved them? When was the last time someone had made time for her for the same reason? As the afternoon turned to evening, Victoria helped Sophia with her homework, listened to her practice reading aloud, and even attempted to braid her hair, with limited success. They made grilled cheese sandwiches for dinner using Michael's secret technique, cutting the crusts off and adding a thin layer of mustard, and Sophia regaled her with stories about her classmates and her dreams of becoming a doctor, like the one who had tried to save her mother. "Daddy says Mama's watching over us from heaven," Sophia said as they cleaned up after dinner. "But sometimes I miss her so much it feels like my chest is going to explode." Victoria's throat tightened. "I bet she's very proud of you," she managed. "Do you have kids?" Sophia asked. "No," Victoria said. "I work too much." Sophia considered this seriously. "That's sad. Kids are the best part of life. That's what Daddy says." When Michael returned home just after 11, exhausted from his shift, he found Victoria and Sophia asleep on the couch together. Sophia curled against Victoria's side, while a Disney movie played softly on the television. The sight stopped him in his tracks. For the past 3 years, it had been just him and Sophia against the world. They had built a life together from the ruins of their tragedy, finding joy in small moments and strength in their bond. But seeing his daughter so comfortable with this mysterious woman who had appeared in their lives triggered something unexpected in Michael's chest. Victoria stirred as he turned off the television, blinking sleepily in the dim light. "She fell asleep about an hour ago," Victoria whispered. I didn't want to wake her. Michael gently scooped Sophia into his arms, marveling as always at how light she felt, how vulnerable. Let me get her to bed, then we can talk. After he had tucked Sophia in and returned to the living room, Michael found Victoria standing by the window, looking out at the quiet street. The storm had passed completely, leaving behind a clear night sky full of stars that were visible even in the city. Thank you for watching her, Michael said softly. I know you didn't sign up for babysitting when you got stranded here. I enjoyed it, Victoria said, and realized she meant it completely. She's an amazing kid. She is, Michael agreed. Sometimes I look at her and wonder how I got so lucky. Even after everything we've been through, she still believes the world is basically good. Victoria turned from the window to study Michael's face in the dim light. He looked tired but content, the kind of bone-deep satisfaction that came from meaningful work and purposeful sacrifice. It was an expression she had never seen in her own mirror. She said something today that made me think, Victoria said carefully, about what love is. Making time for people even when you don't want to. Michael smiled. Sophia's got an old soul. Sometimes I think she understands things better than adults do. Do you ever regret it? Victoria asked suddenly. The sacrifices you make for her? Working 2 jobs, no social life, no time for yourself? Michael looked surprised by the question. Regret loving my daughter? Never. Everything I do is so she can have chances I never had, so she can become whoever she wants to be. He paused, studying Victoria's face. Don't you have people you do anything for? Victoria felt that familiar tightness in her chest, the one that came whenever she was forced to confront the emptiness of her personal life. I'm not sure I do, she admitted quietly. That's sad, Michael said, echoing his daughter's earlier observation. Everyone needs people to fight for. Otherwise, what's the point of any of it? As they prepared for another night, Victoria on the pull-out couch, Michael in his bedroom down the hall, Victoria found herself thinking about Michael's question. What was the point of any of it? She had built an empire, accumulated wealth beyond imagination, achieved power that most people could only dream of. But she had no one to share it with, no one to fight for, no one who cared about her success except as it related to their own interests. Lying in the dark, listening to the sounds of the house settling around her, Victoria Sterling realized that she was about to face the most difficult decision of her life. Tomorrow, she would have to return to her world, to the responsibilities and pressures that came with her position. But she would also have to figure out how to live with the knowledge of what she was missing, what money couldn't buy, what success had cost her. In the morning, everything would change again. But tonight, she was still just Victoria, lying on a second-hand couch in a house full of love, trying to figure out what it all meant. The storm outside had passed, but the storm inside Victoria Sterling's heart was just beginning to build. Victoria woke to the sound of Sophia's laughter coming from the kitchen. Sunlight streamed through the windows, bright and warm after the previous day's storm. As she sat up on the couch, she could smell bacon frying and hear Sophia chattering excitedly about something. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine that this was her life, waking up to a child's laughter, to the smell of breakfast cooking, to the warmth of a home where she belonged. Victoria, Victoria! Sophia called from the kitchen. Come see what Daddy's making. Victoria found Michael standing at the stove, wearing an apron that read, World's Best Dad, and expertly flipping what appeared to be elaborate pancakes shaped like animals. Sophia was bouncing on her toes beside him, clapping her hands with delight. Daddy makes special pancakes on Saturdays, Sophia explained. Look, that one's an elephant. Michael turned to Victoria with a sheepish grin. Saturday tradition, he said. Sophia picks the animals. I do my best to make them recognizable. Can you make a giraffe next? Sophia asked. Victoria needs to see the giraffe. As Victoria watched Michael carefully pour batter in the shape of a long-necked animal, she felt that now familiar ache in her chest. This was what she had missed by choosing career over everything else. These small, perfect moments that made up a real life. Saturday morning pancakes and a daughter's joy and the satisfaction of making someone else happy. Her phone buzzed again. More missed calls, more urgent messages. The outside world was becoming increasingly frantic about her absence. But looking at Michael and Sophia, so focused on their simple joy, Victoria couldn't bring herself to care about quarterly reports and board meetings. I should probably let my employer know that I'm okay, Victoria said carefully. May I use your landline? My cell service is still spotty. Of course, Michael said, nodding toward the phone hanging on the kitchen wall. Take your time. Victoria called her assistant Jennifer, who answered with barely controlled panic in her voice. Ms. Sterling? Thank God. Are you— I'm fine, Jennifer, Victoria interrupted. I need you to clear my schedule for today and move Monday's board meeting to Tuesday. Ma'am, I can't do that. The board is already upset about the delay and— The board answers to me, not the other way around, Victoria said firmly. I'll be back tomorrow evening. Handle it. As she hung up, Victoria caught Michael watching her with a puzzled expression. She realized that her tone had shifted completely during the call. From the warm, casual voice she'd been using with him and Sophia to the commanding, imperious tone she used to run her empire. Sorry, she said, trying to return to her normal voice. Work can be demanding. Must be some job, Michael said mildly. But there was a new wariness in his eyes. The rest of the morning passed pleasantly enough. They ate the animal pancakes. Sophia's giraffe was declared a masterpiece. And then Michael suggested they walk to the neighborhood park to see how it had weathered the storm. Victoria borrowed a pair of Sophia's sneakers, the only shoes in the house that came close to fitting her, and they set off through the quiet Saturday morning streets. The park had taken a beating. Several large trees were down, and the playground equipment was scattered with debris. But neighbors had already begun the cleanup process, working together to clear pathways and check for damage. Victoria watched in fascination as people who clearly didn't have much shared what they had: tools, labor, coffee from thermoses. Mrs. Johnson, you remember Victoria, Michael said, introducing her to an elderly African-American woman who was coordinating the cleanup efforts. She got stranded in the storm. Well, aren't you a blessing? Mrs. Johnson said, shaking Victoria's hand warmly. Michael's got such a good heart, always helping people, and Sophia just lights up this whole neighborhood. As they worked alongside the other volunteers, picking up branches and clearing walkways, Victoria found herself in conversations she'd never had before. People talked about their jobs, teaching, nursing, factory work, with pride and satisfaction. They asked about each other's families, shared stories about their children, offered help with everything from babysitting to car repairs. You're not from around here, are you? Asked a man named Dave who worked construction. You've got that look like you're seeing all this for the first time. Victoria realized she was staring again. I guess I'm not used to communities like this, she said honestly. Like what? Dave asked. People helping each other without expecting anything in return. Dave and Mrs. Johnson exchanged a look. Honey, Mrs. Johnson said gently, where are you from that people don't help each other? Victoria didn't know how to answer that question. How could she explain that in her world, every interaction was transactional, every relationship was strategic? How could she tell them that she lived in a place where wealth created barriers instead of bonds? After they finished at the park, Michael suggested they stop by the grocery store to pick up ingredients for dinner. I thought I'd make my grandmother's pozole recipe, he said. It's Sophia's favorite. The grocery store was a modest chain store, nothing like the upscale markets where Victoria usually shopped. But as they walked the aisles with Sophia chattering about which vegetables looked best and Michael carefully comparing prices, Victoria found herself fascinated by the ordinary magic of family shopping. Daddy always lets me pick out a special treat on Saturdays, Sophia announced, leading Victoria to the cookie aisle. But just one thing, because money doesn't grow on trees. Victoria watched Sophia deliberate seriously between different packages of cookies, finally settling on a modest package of chocolate chip cookies because they'll taste good with milk before bed. At the checkout, Michael pulled out a carefully organized coupon folder and counted out exact change from a worn wallet. Victoria realized that this shopping trip, which probably cost less than she usually spent on a single lunch, represented a significant expense for their family budget. When they got home, Michael began preparing the pozole with the kind of ritualistic care that spoke of tradition and memory. Sophia helped by carefully washing vegetables while chattering about her abuela, Michael's grandmother, who had taught him the recipe. Abuela always said that food tastes better when it's made with love, Sophia explained to Victoria seriously. That's why Daddy's cooking is the best in the world. Victoria found herself drawn into the preparation, chopping onions under Michael's patient instruction and listening to stories about his grandmother, who had raised him after his parents were deported. The kitchen filled with the rich aromas of garlic and spices, and Victoria realized she had never experienced anything like this. Cooking as an act of love, food as a way of preserving family history. As the pozole simmered, Sophia curled up on the couch with a book while Michael and Victoria sat at the small kitchen table with coffee. The afternoon light streamed through the windows, highlighting the comfortable wear of the furniture and the careful organization of a household where everything had to serve multiple purposes. Can I ask you something? Michael said, his voice careful. And you don't have to answer if you don't want to. Victoria nodded, though she felt a flutter of anxiety. When you called work earlier, you sounded different, like you were used to giving orders, having people jump when you spoke. And some of the things you've said, he trailed off, then started again. You're not just someone who works in business, are you? Victoria felt her carefully constructed story beginning to crumble. She had gotten too comfortable, let too much of her real self show through. What do you mean? I think you're someone important, maybe very important. Michael's eyes were kind but searching. And I think you've been hiding that from us. Victoria stared down at her coffee mug, trying to figure out how to respond. The truth would change everything. The way Michael looked at her, the way Sophia interacted with her, the magical normalcy of the past 2 days. Once they knew who she was, she would become a symbol instead of a person, an opportunity instead of a friend. Does it matter? She asked quietly. I don't know, Michael said honestly. But I've been thinking about the way you reacted to everything here. Like you'd never seen people help each other before. Like kindness was something unusual. And that makes me sad for you, whatever your situation is. Before Victoria could respond, Sophia appeared in the kitchen doorway, book in hand. What are you guys talking about? She asked, with a child's uncanny ability to sense adult tension. Nothing important, Mija, Michael said quickly. How's your book? Sophia looked between them suspiciously, but allowed herself to be distracted by describing the story she was reading. As she talked, Victoria made a decision. Sophia, she said during a pause in the little girl's story, what would you think if I told you I had a really big job? Like really big? Sophia considered this seriously. How big? Really, really big. The kind where I have to make decisions that affect lots of people. Are you a doctor? Sophia asked hopefully. Or maybe a teacher. Those are really important jobs. Victoria smiled despite her anxiety. No, I run a company. A big company. Like McDonald's? Sophia asked, her eyes widening. Something like that, Victoria said. And sometimes people treat me differently when they find out about my job. Sometimes they get nervous or they start acting fake and I lose friends. Sophia frowned. That's dumb. You're still the same person whether you have a big job or a little job. You'd think so, Victoria said softly. But it doesn't always work that way. Michael was watching this exchange with growing understanding. How big? He asked quietly. Victoria took a deep breath. My name isn't just Victoria, it's Victoria Sterling. I'm the CEO of Sterling Industries. The silence that followed was deafening. Michael's face went through a series of expressions. Surprise, understanding, and something that might have been disappointment. Sophia looked confused. I don't know what that means, Sophia said finally. It means, Michael said slowly, his voice carefully neutral, that Victoria is one of the richest people in America. Maybe the world. Sophia's eyes widened. Really? Like Princess Rich? Richer than a princess, Victoria said quietly, watching Michael's face for his reaction. Wow, Sophia breathed. That's like being a superhero. But Michael wasn't smiling. Why didn't you tell us? He asked. Victoria felt her chest tighten. Because I knew this would happen. I knew you'd start looking at me differently, start treating me like I'm not a real person. You lied to us, Michael said, and Victoria could hear the hurt in his voice. I didn't lie, exactly. I just didn't tell you everything. That's the same thing, Michael said. We took you into our home, shared our food, our lives, and you were pretending to be someone else. I wasn't pretending, Victoria said, her voice rising. This is the most real I've been in years. When I'm with you and Sophia, I get to just be Victoria, not CEO Victoria or Billionaire Victoria or magazine cover Victoria. Just me. Sophia looked between them, confusion and concern clouding her features. Are you guys fighting? Michael ran his hands through his hair, clearly struggling with his emotions. I need some air, he said finally, standing up abruptly. Sophia, stay with Victoria. I'll be right back. After he left, Sophia climbed into Victoria's lap, something she had never done before. Daddy's not really mad, she said wisely. He's hurt. There's a difference. I know, Victoria said, wrapping her arms around the little girl. I hurt his feelings by not telling him the truth. But you were scared, Sophia said matter-of-factly. Sometimes when I'm scared, I don't tell the truth either. Like when I broke Mama's picture frame, but I said the cat did it. Victoria almost smiled despite everything. Did your dad forgive you? Eventually. He said lying is worse than breaking things because trust is harder to fix than picture frames. Sophia was quiet for a moment. Are you going to leave now? The question hit Victoria like a physical blow. Do you want me to leave? Sophia shook her head emphatically. I like you. You're still the same Victoria who helped me make cookies and played games and listened to me read. Money doesn't change who you are inside. Victoria felt tears threatening. This 8-year-old understood something that most adults never grasped, that wealth and status were external things, that the person underneath remained the same. When Michael returned 20 minutes later, he found them still sitting together on the couch, Sophia reading aloud from her book, while Victoria listened with genuine attention. We need to talk, Michael said quietly. After Sophia was settled with her book and a snack, Victoria and Michael went out to the back porch. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the small yard and the neat rows of the garden. I've been thinking, Michael said without preamble. And I keep coming back to one question. Why? Why would someone with your resources, your options, want to spend time with us? Victoria had been dreading this question, but she owed him honesty. Because for the first time in years, I felt like a human being instead of a walking corporation. Because Sophia looked at me like I was just a person, not a net worth figure. Because you offered me shelter without knowing who I was or what I could do for you. And now that we know, Victoria looked out at the garden, at the tomato plants Sophia had tended so carefully. Now you'll start calculating, consciously or not. You'll wonder what I want, what angle I'm playing. You'll second-guess every kindness, every conversation. Sophia will start asking for things she thinks I can afford to give her. And this perfect little bubble where I got to be normal will pop. Michael was quiet for a long moment. You have a pretty low opinion of people, he said finally. I have experience with people, Victoria replied. When you have money like I do, everyone wants something. They just dress it up differently. Everyone? Victoria thought about the past 2 days, about Michael's instant kindness to a stranger, about Sophia's innocent joy, about the neighbors working together at the park. Not everyone, she admitted quietly. Sophia was right earlier, Michael said. Money doesn't change who you are inside, but it sounds like it's changed who you think other people are. The truth of his words hit Victoria hard. Somewhere along the way, she had stopped seeing people as individuals and started seeing them as potential threats to her wealth or her autonomy. She had built walls so high that she couldn't see over them anymore. I don't know how to do this, she said quietly. I don't know how to have relationships that aren't about business. I don't know how to trust people. I don't even know how to be around children. You've been doing fine with Sophia, Michael pointed out. She's completely taken with you. Because she doesn't know what I am. She knows exactly what you are, Michael said firmly. You're the lady who helped her make cookies and listened to her stories and braided her hair. That's what matters to an 8-year-old. Victoria felt tears she had been holding back begin to fall. I don't want to go back, she whispered. I don't want to go back to being alone in my tower, making decisions that affect thousands of people I'll never meet, eating dinner by myself while reading profit reports. Michael moved closer to her on the porch steps. Then don't. What do you mean? I mean, you're Victoria Sterling. If anyone has the power to change their life, it's you. As the sun set over the neighborhood, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Victoria found herself imagining a different kind of life. Not the complete abandonment of her responsibilities, but a life with balance, with relationships, with meaning beyond profit margins. Can I ask you something? She said. Michael nodded. If I were just Victoria, just a woman who got stranded in a storm, would you want to see me again? Michael studied her face in the fading light. The woman who played with my daughter and helped clean up our neighborhood and made Sophia laugh more than she has in months? Yeah, I'd want to see her again. Even knowing what you know now? Especially knowing what I know now, Michael said quietly. Because now I understand why you looked so surprised by simple kindness. Now I know why you seemed like you were seeing the world for the first time. And now I know how brave you were to let us see the real you. As they sat together in the gathering darkness, Victoria Sterling began to imagine a different kind of future. One where her wealth was a tool for good rather than a barrier to connection, where she could have both success and relationships, where she could be both powerful and human. Tomorrow, she would have to return to her world. But tonight, she was still just Victoria, sitting on a porch with a good man who saw her for who she really was. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough. The Monday morning sun streamed through the windows of the small house as Victoria sat at the kitchen table, watching Michael make breakfast while Sophia got ready for school. Today was the day she would have to return to her world, to Sterling Industries and board meetings and the weight of billions of dollars in responsibility. But first, she had something important to do. "Sophia!" she called as the little girl came into the kitchen wearing her school backpack. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" Sophia plopped down in the chair next to Victoria, swinging her legs. "Are you leaving today?" "I have to go back to work," Victoria said gently. "But I wanted to tell you something important first." "Okay," Sophia said, giving Victoria her full attention. "I want you to know that meeting you and your dad has been the best thing that's happened to me in a very long time. You taught me things I didn't even know I needed to learn." "Like what?" Sophia asked curiously. Victoria thought carefully about her words. "You taught me that the most important things in life can't be bought. You taught me that kindness is a choice, and that love makes everything better. And you taught me that sometimes the best adventures happen when you least expect them." Sophia smiled. "You taught me things too." "Really? What?" "You taught me that grown-ups can still learn new things, and that it's okay to be scared sometimes, and that friends can come from anywhere." Sophia paused thoughtfully. "And you taught me that rich people aren't all mean like in the movies." Victoria laughed, feeling her heart simultaneously break and heal. "Can I tell you a secret?" Sophia nodded eagerly. "Before I met you and your dad, I was very lonely. I had forgotten what it felt like to have real friends. But you reminded me. Will you come visit us?" Sophia asked seriously. "Would you like that?" "Yes. And maybe next time you can help me plant seeds in the garden. Daddy says we're going to plant pumpkins for Halloween." Michael cleared his throat from where he stood at the stove. "Sophia, you need to finish getting ready for school. The bus will be here soon." As Sophia gathered her things, Victoria felt a familiar panic rising in her chest. Once Sophia left for school, she would have to call Marcus and arrange to be picked up. She would have to put on her business clothes and her CEO mask and return to being Victoria Sterling, billionaire executive. The thought made her physically sick. "Hey," Michael said softly, sitting down across from her at the table. "You okay?" Victoria realized she was gripping her coffee mug so tightly her knuckles were white. "I don't know how to go back," she admitted. "I don't know how to pretend that this didn't happen, that I didn't learn what I learned here." "Then don't pretend," Michael said simply. "It's not that easy. I have responsibilities, thousands of employees, shareholders, and you also have a choice about how you handle those responsibilities," Michael interrupted gently. "You're not the same person who got stranded in that storm 3 days ago. So don't go back to living the same life." Sophia returned to the kitchen with her backpack properly organized and her hair braided. "I'm ready," she announced. Victoria stood up and knelt down to Sophia's level. "I want you to have this," she said, pulling off the simple silver bracelet she'd been wearing. It wasn't expensive. She'd bought it years ago at a craft fair, and it was one of the few pieces of jewelry she owned that wasn't a status symbol. "For me?" Sophia asked, eyes wide. "It's not worth much money," Victoria said as she fastened it around Sophia's small wrist. "But it's special to me, and I want you to have it so you'll remember that some friendships are precious no matter how long they last." Sophia hugged Victoria fiercely. "I love it, and I'll remember everything." As Michael walked Sophia to the bus stop, Victoria stood at the kitchen window watching them. She could see Michael pointing out storm damage that had been repaired over the weekend, neighbors already out working in their yards, the daily rhythm of a community that looked out for each other. In a few hours, she would be back in her penthouse, looking down at the city from 40 floors up, as removed from real life as an astronaut orbiting the Earth. When Michael returned, he found Victoria pacing the small living room, her phone in her hand. "Second thoughts?" he asked. "Third and fourth thoughts," Victoria admitted. "Michael, what if I don't call them? What if I just stayed?" Michael sat down on the couch and gestured for her to join him. "You could," he said carefully. "But running away from your life isn't the same as changing it." "What do you mean?" "I mean, you have power that most people only dream of. You could use that power to make things better, for yourself, for other people. But you can't do that if you're hiding from who you are." Victoria sank down beside him. "I don't know how to be both," she said quietly. "I don't know how to be Victoria Sterling, CEO, and still be the person I was here with you and Sophia." "Maybe you start small," Michael suggested. "Maybe you figure out what mattered most about being here, and you find ways to keep that in your regular life." Victoria thought about the past 3 days, the genuine conversations, the simple pleasures, the feeling of being valued for herself rather than her wealth. What mattered most was feeling connected to other people, feeling like I belonged somewhere. So find ways to connect. Use your position to do good instead of just to accumulate more wealth. Build relationships that aren't about business. "Is that what you want?" Victoria asked, suddenly vulnerable. A relationship that isn't about business? Michael looked at her seriously. I want to get to know the real Victoria Sterling, not the CEO, not the billionaire, but the woman who helped my daughter make cookies and cried when she talked about being lonely. I want to see if this connection we felt is real or just a product of unusual circumstances. Victoria felt something loosen in her chest. I'd like that too. But I have to warn you, my life is complicated. There are security concerns, media attention, people who will have opinions about anyone I spend time with. Then we'll figure it out as we go, Michael said simply. If it's worth doing, it's worth dealing with complications. At 10 o'clock, Victoria finally made the call. Marcus answered immediately, and within an hour, a black SUV pulled up in front of Michael's house. Victoria had changed back into her business clothes, though they looked wrinkled and tired after 3 days. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail instead of her usual perfect styling, and she wore no makeup. She looked, Michael thought, more beautiful than any magazine cover could have captured. This is it, she said, standing in the living room that had been her sanctuary. This is a beginning, Michael corrected, not an ending. Victoria had never been good at goodbyes, but she found herself reluctant to leave the safety of this small house. Through the window, she could see Marcus waiting by the SUV, probably checking his watch and calculating how long it would take to get to the office. Victoria, Michael said, taking her hands in his. Promise me something. What? Promise me you won't let them turn you back into someone you don't want to be. Promise me you'll remember that you have choices. Victoria looked into his kind eyes and felt a strength she hadn't known she possessed. I promise. The ride back to downtown Detroit was surreal. Marcus briefed her on the weekend's crisis management, how they'd handled the media inquiries about her absence, what the board had been told, which meetings had been rescheduled. Victoria listened with half her attention, watching the city change from working-class neighborhoods to business districts, from real life to the artificial bubble of wealth and power. Her penthouse felt like a museum when she walked in. Everything was perfect, expensive, and sterile. The silence was deafening after 3 days of Sophia's chatter and Michael's steady presence. Victoria stood in her living room, looking out at the city spread below her, and felt like an alien returning to a planet that no longer made sense. Her assistant Jennifer was waiting with a stack of urgent documents and a schedule packed with meetings that had been postponed from her absence. But Victoria found herself thinking about Sophia's garden, about the neighbors working together in the park, about Michael's patient kindness in the face of her deception. Clear my afternoon, Victoria told Jennifer. Ma'am, I can't do that. The board meeting was specifically scheduled. I said clear it, Victoria repeated, using a tone that brooked no argument, and set up a meeting with the heads of our charitable foundation for tomorrow morning. Jennifer looked confused. The foundation? Victoria had barely paid attention to Sterling Industries' charitable arm, beyond approving tax-deductible donations that enhanced the company's public image. But suddenly she was interested in what they were actually doing with those millions of dollars. Yes, the foundation. I want to know everything. Where the money goes, what programs we fund, what impact we're actually having. Over the next few days, Victoria threw herself into learning about a side of her company she had never bothered to explore. She discovered that Sterling Industries donated millions annually to various causes, but most of it went to large, established organizations where the money disappeared into administrative costs and overhead. Very little was reaching the people who actually needed help. She thought about Michael working 2 jobs to provide for Sophia, about the neighbors who couldn't afford to repair storm damage to their homes, about children in that community who might not have access to the kind of educational opportunities that Sophia deserved. On Thursday afternoon, Victoria made an announcement that sent shockwaves through the business world. Sterling Industries would be partnering with community organizations in underserved neighborhoods across the country to fund education, job training, and small business development programs. But more than that, Victoria herself would be taking a hands-on role in these initiatives. The CEO of a Fortune 500 company doesn't do community outreach, one board member protested during the emergency meeting called to discuss her plans. This CEO does, Victoria replied calmly. We're going to prove that businesses can be profitable and socially responsible at the same time. The media was baffled by Victoria Sterling's sudden transformation from reclusive billionaire to community activist. Business journals questioned her sanity, while social media buzzed with speculation about what had triggered such a dramatic change. Victoria ignored it all. She had more important things to think about. On Friday evening, she found herself standing on Michael's front porch, holding a bouquet of flowers from Sophia's favorite flower shop, and feeling more nervous than she had before any board meeting or investor presentation. Michael opened the door, his face breaking into a smile when he saw her. You came back, I promised Sophia I'd help her plant pumpkins, Victoria said, holding up a bag of seeds she'd bought at the garden center. Victoria! Sophia's voice came from inside the house, followed by the sound of running feet. You came back! Did you bring the pumpkin seeds? As Sophia dragged her to the backyard to show her the plot of soil Michael had prepared for their pumpkin patch, Victoria felt something settle in her chest. This was where she belonged. Not exclusively, but partially. She could be both Victoria Sterling, CEO, and Victoria, friend to a little girl who believed in magic and kindness in equal measure. How was work? Michael asked as they knelt in the dirt, showing Sophia how to plant seeds at the proper depth. Different, Victoria said. I'm making some changes. Big ones. Like what? Victoria looked up from the soil to meet his eyes. Like remembering that money is supposed to be a tool, not a master. Like using my resources to help communities instead of just shareholders. Like making time for things that matter. And what matters? Michael asked softly. Victoria looked at Sophia, who was carefully patting soil over a newly planted seed while singing a made-up song about pumpkins. She looked at Michael, whose steady presence made her feel grounded in a way she'd never experienced before. She looked at the small garden that represented hope and growth and the patient tending of something beautiful. This, she said simply. This matters. 6 months later, the neighborhood had been transformed. Sterling Industries' community investment program had funded a new after-school center, a small business incubator, and educational scholarships for local students. Victoria had kept her promise to be hands-on, spending at least 1 day a week in the community, learning names and stories and dreams. Sophia's pumpkins had grown enormous, winning first prize at the Community Harvest Festival that Sterling Industries had sponsored. Michael had been able to quit his night cleaning job and focus on a day shift supervisor position that Victoria had helped him secure at a local manufacturing company. And Victoria had learned that the best investment she'd ever made wasn't in technology or real estate or stock portfolios. It was in relationships, in community, in the radical idea that success meant more than the numbers in her bank account. As she sat on Michael's front porch on a crisp October evening, watching Sophia carve faces into their prize-winning pumpkins while Michael prepared dinner in the kitchen, Victoria Sterling finally understood what her grandmother had meant all those years ago, when she'd said that the richest people weren't the ones with the most money, but the ones with the most love in their lives. The storm that had stranded her in this neighborhood had been the best thing that ever happened to her. It had washed away the barriers between who she was and who she could be, between success and fulfillment, between wealth and richness. And when Sophia looked up from her pumpkin carving to grin at Victoria, with orange-stained fingers and pure joy in her eyes, Victoria knew that she had finally found her way home. The billionaire who had once slept on a poor dad's couch had discovered that kindness was the only currency that really mattered, and that the best return on investment was measured not in dollars, but in love.